As many of you know, this is a story that we followed as the developments have come to light here. Matt Taibbi's house was visited by IRS agents on March 9th, which just so happened to be the same day that he was called to testify in Congress about his Twitter files reporting. Now, it obviously seemed fishy at the time and highly unlikely that the two events on the same day occurring at once was just a coincidence. But now Matt Taibbi has published a follow-up piece on his Substack, which really ought to erase any doubts about the corrupt nature of this quote-unquote IRS investigation. So I'll put this article up on the screen. This is from his Substack, and thank you to a friend and supporter of the show, Robert Penner, for tipping us off to this. My crazy IRS case. A House subcommittee investigation reveals new details about my IRS case that should frighten any journalist, any American citizen, for that matter. Saturday, December 24th, 2022, was one of the most memorable and most panicked days of my life. I spent Christmas Eve last year alone, holed up in the Park 55 Hotel in San Francisco, frantically trying to put together what I thought was the most explosive of the Twitter files reports, Twitter and other government agencies. My wife and children were due to arrive for Christmas the next day, and I spent the morning checking and rechecking a story I knew might make people upset. Now, I remember this because I remember thinking, oh, why would you drop such an important Twitter files report midday Christmas Eve? Like, it's just a very, very odd day. It happened to be a Saturday. People are out doing their shopping. It just didn't feel like a day you'd want to drop something that important. So it did definitely register with me. Okay, Christmas Eve, making this explosive file dump, right? So he says it was based on documents passed to Twitter by the FBI-led Foreign Influence Task Force. They showed the company was receiving content recommendations in bulk from an array of federal agencies through the FBI about a range of topics, from domestic extremist groups in the U.S. to leftist activists in Venezuela to Ukraine, Joe Biden, and the energy company Burisma. The FBI had just denounced the Twitter files as the work of conspiracy theorists, quote unquote, whose, quote, sole purpose was discrediting the agency. If earlier reports made the Bureau unhappy, what reaction would this story inspire? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Thanks to a just published letter to IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel by House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan. This is a typo here. Information sent. Information sent. There's a typo. You know, he should be called in. He should be called into Congress to actually explain that. That could be some kind of like perjury, right?
That's probably.
He can go to jail for 5 years for that, I think.
That might be code for his Russian handlers.
Yeah, maybe. He might have to answer a few questions about that. That's kind of fishy there. That's a little suspicious if you ask me.
A little suspicious.
Yeah, but
we got to get Plaskett on the case.
Yeah, got to get Plaskett on that. Here's this letter here. The Committee on the Judiciary is investigating the circumstances of the Internal Revenue Service's visit to the home of journalist Matt Taibbi on the same day that Mr. Taibbi testified before the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. On March 27th, 2023, we wrote to you seeking information about the IRS's visit to Mr. Taibbi's home. On May 6th, and with Taibbi's consent, the IRS produced some documents responsive to the request. These documents, however, raise more questions than they answer. The IRS asserted to the committee that it sent a letter to Mr. Taibbi on October 24th, 2019, 9 days after Mr. Taibbi filed his 2018 tax return, asking Mr. Taibbi to verify his return because it met identity theft criteria and could not be processed until he confirmed. The IRS alleged that it sent a second letter to Mr. Taibbi on March 23rd, 2020. However, according to Mr. Taibbi, neither he nor his accountant received either of these letters or any other notification that there was an issue with his 2018 tax return. That is until the IRS conducted a field visit at Mr. Taibbi's home 3 years later. The IRS also failed to produce these purported letters to the committee. Now, here's this highlighted piece. The IRS's production shows that the IRS opened its examination of Mr. Taibbi's 2018 tax return on December 24th, 2022, a Christmas Eve and a Saturday. That was the same Saturday and Christmas Eve that he dropped that Twitter Files report. Right. So now you have two unthinkable coincidences. Not only did they visit his home on the day he testified, but they opened this investigation up the day he dropped that Twitter Files dump, which was Christmas Eve, a Saturday. Now, anybody who's made a call to the IRS or any other government agency for that matter knows you can't get in touch with them on a Saturday, no matter what. Christmas Eve on a Saturday, they're closed on Saturday. They're not working Christmas Eve, especially on a Saturday. They're probably not working Christmas Eve at all. On a weekend, Christmas Eve, they open that investigation, which happens to be the same day he drops that. I mean, come on. That is what you call a smoking gun. It has to be. Even if you buy that the first instance was this crazy coincidence. To think that both of those days, both of those actions happen to coincide on the same day twice, come on. That's insane.
Yeah, and they tried to say that this investigation was opened in 2018, but they weren't able to produce any such letters. And Taibbi, and I'm sure this is true, says he hires a very reputable accounting firm for the last 10 years, and they received no such letters from the IRS about they claimed his account indicated it might be some kind of identity theft associated. There are no letters to that effect at all that they produced. Right. Obviously, this is political retaliation. I mean, this is part of what Nixon got impeached for, right? Weaponizing the IRS. Right. So why aren't we impeaching Joe Biden? I mean, there should be some accountability here. And again, I will just point out how crazy it is that we're living in a world where Jim Jordan is like a champion of freedom, right? Looking into the government, and who are the bad guys? It's Plaskett and it's Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Well, he gets into that. He actually says that at the very end of the article. I'll just read this off the screen now, and then I'll go to the second part that I do want to read from this. He says, thanks to Jim Jordan's committee for help with this, and for the journalists who want to roll eyes, I'd ask, why is he, Jim Jordan, the one defending reporters while so many news organizations have stopped? Why is a right-wing Republican congressman from Ohio defending journalists and not, forget about Democrats, but why aren't journalists stepping up to defend journalists?
Of course.
How is this not a threat to the profession?
How dangerous is that? That the IRS clearly are retaliating against this reporter. Who's telling them to do that? We really need to find that out. Like, they didn't just do this on their own. Who told them to do that? Who in the administration is telling the IRS to go investigate reporters who drop Twitter files? Right. This is not a joke. The fact that no newspaper, no TV outlet is covering it, we're going into the election season, so all the talk about how we have to protect the country from fascism is really gearing up right now. I can't take it seriously because of things like this. I mean, when I hear Democrats say we have to protect the country from fascism, I say, you mean like Plaskett, like Wasserman Schultz? Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Because that looks like fascism to me.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Plaskett, that fucking piece of human shit, sent a fucking letter threatening Taibbi with 5 years in prison.
Yeah, based on a junk report from a semi-primetime MSNBC host. What is Mehdi Hasan on at 6 o'clock? I mean, you're talking about a mid-level MSNBC host says this might have been a lie under oath, even though it obviously so patently wasn't. And this idiot watches that and thinks, oh, why don't I send him a letter threatening him with 5 years of jail time based on this report, which she was actually dumb enough to actually cite Mehdi Hassan as her primary source for being concerned about this, right? I mean, this would be like if a Republican said, hey, I saw on Sean Hannity last night, that ex-Democrat may have done X thing, and therefore, okay, now I'm going to cite that as reason to threaten them with jail time. Like, you're literally just citing the most abject partisan hack you can find and saying, well, I saw this on TV, so maybe you should be in jail.
Yeah, no, that is terrifying. It's Nixonian. And the fact that as soon as this came to light, there was not an enormous public outcry, particularly driven by the press, tells you that we no longer have a free press. I mean, if the press is not going to protect a reporter from the IRS, who will?
Right, exactly.
Other than Jim Jordan, apparently.
Right, exactly. All right, let me just read a little bit more of this, and then we will.
And just a reminder for people, that fucking other piece of human excrement known as AOC actually jumped on that and went after Matt Taibbi after Plaskett sent that letter.
Just like the shit lib like telephone game. She sees it on MSNBC, so she reports it, and then AOC, hey, did you hear what Stacey Plaskett saw on Mehdi Hassan on MSNBC? We can get
what a piece of fucking garbage she is now.
Ostensibly, okay, so this was after he cites that, right? Where, okay, now we find out the investigation was opened on Saturday, Christmas Eve, which happens to coincide with when those files came out, right? Ostensibly, the case was about my 2018 tax return, about which even the IRS doesn't claim to have contacted me for 3 years before this new assigned date. The opening of the investigation preceded a visit to my home by an IRS agent on March 9th when I testified in Congress about the Twitter files and government censorship. Even more unnerving are other details in Jordan's letter. On January 27th, 2023, this is from Jim Jordan's letter, the IRS assigned an agent to Mr. Taibbi's case to initiate face-to-face contact. The IRS documents reflect that the case agent performed an extensive investigation of Mr. Taibbi using publicly available search engines and commercial investigative software such as Anywho, Consumer Affairs, LexisNexis, Accruent, and Google. The IRS's dossier about Mr. Taibbi included information such as Mr. Taibbi's voter registration records, whether he possessed a hunting or fishing license, whether he had a concealed weapons permit, and his telephone numbers. When the IRS checks to see if you have a carry permit and visits your home at a time when they owe you money, it's time to worry. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, I mean, the details of that, like I said, it's just pretty chilling. And, look, I'm sorry, I don't want to reveal too much personal details, but I've had interactions with the IRS in the past. To my knowledge, I am in good standing with them. But, I'm an independent contractor. My tax returns are a little bit more complicated than someone who's on a W-2. So, I get follow-ups from them from time to time. Hey, what about this? Are you sure this is right? Yes. Okay. They give it, I'm not on the wrong side of the law, at least not that I know of. Knock on wood. That was my wood table that I just banged on there.
Keep it up with this show. You wait.
Yeah, right. I've been called by the IRS. Like I've gotten phone calls from people who are at the IRS. I've gotten letters from the IRS. Before they would initiate face-to-face contact in a legit investigation, you'd get a call. You'd get a call, or you'd get multiple letters. And I'm assuming a guy like Matt Taibbi can afford a pretty good accountant who's not going to lose mail from the IRS. So, I'm assuming it is very, very safe to assume that you'd have heard from them before they initiate face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
face-to-face contact. There is no other explanation than that is raw political retaliation. And it tells you a lot about how corrupt the system has become, that they felt they could be that brazen. And so far they're right. You've got this Jim Jordan committee investigating it, but the press is not reporting it. And it's not clear to me that there are going to be any real consequences for this.
Please clap.